The Lay of the Lost Colony, a chronicle of the White Valley. This is a Moondragon original production, all rights reserved. It is told that in the early days of the 1800s, when the children of the East pushed ever westward, in a great tide of hope and hunger, there were many paths into the wilderness, and many fates that befell those who dared them. Most followed the known trails, the Oregon and the Santa Fe, guided by the scars of 1,000 wagons before them. But some, driven by the fierce spirit of independence, or lured by whispers of untouched valleys and rivers running with gold, struck out upon paths that were unmapped and untested. Of these stories, the company of Henry Cooper is among the most sorrowful, yet the most hopeful, and it is a tale that I now set off. Drawn from the fragments of a diary bound in raw hide, and the songs still sung in the high, lonely places of the Wind Ridge Range. It began not in the west, but in the clattering industrial gloom of Pittsburgh, whence Henry Cooper, a man of logic and ink-stained hands, found his world had grown too small and too dark. He dreamed of skies and wide open fields. So he sought out to gather himself a fellowship of discontented yet hopeful men, sturdy craftsmen, and farmers whose land had turned grey with coal dust, and idealists who sought to build a new world. They numbered in total 120 souls when their wagon train, containing 40 wagons strong, left the mud and clamor of Independence, Missouri in the spring of 1849. Their aim was not the gold fields of California, but a rumored place called White Valley, a land of fertile soil and gentle winters, said to lie just beyond the shining mountains. Their guide was a game trapper named Grimrock, a man of few words and many winters in the high country, whose face was a map of scars and sun squints. He alone claimed to have seen the valley, and he alone claimed to know the secret paths through the mountains that would lead them there. For many weeks the journey was just as any other across the plains, the back-breaking labor, the terror of river crossings, the vast, breathtaking emptiness of the prairie sea under the endless dome of the heavens. They endured the baking sun and the torrential thunderstorms that turned the world to soup, and they buried three of their number, claimed by fever and accident. The first true shadow of doubt and despair fell when they turned north from the well-worn ruts of the Oregon Trail, leaving the great river of migration for a faint old trail that only their guide seemed to know. This disquieted a great many of the people from their wagon train, as the land grew steeper and the grass thinner. It was then that the great conflict arose, not from without, but from within. A man named Silas Crocker, a blacksmith of formidable strength and an even louder voice, began to publicly question Cooper's leadership and Rock's guidance. "He leads us to ruin," Crocker proclaimed at one council meeting where the moon hung like a sliver of light in the sky. "We follow the whispers of a mountain ghost and the dreams of a bookseller. We should turn back to the true trail, to Oregon, where there is no earth to be tilled." Cooper, though weary, stood firm, his voice quiet but clear as a bell in the thin air. "We did not leave the known world to seek another known world, Silas. We seek a home, not a plot. To turn back is to admit our dream was only a dream. I, for one, believe it is more." Thus the company was split. About half of the wagons heeded Croker's doubt and chose to turn back to the well-known trails. The remainder, with their hearts steadied by Cooper's unwavering faith, pressed forward into the ever-rising mountains, choosing to follow the silent, stoic figure of Grimrock. It was a fateful shundering, for Crocker's party, rejoining the main trail, found safe passage and settled in Williametta Valley, their journey ending in comfort and community. But for Cooper's people, the true test was only beginning. They had chosen a path of peril, and peril would claim its due. The mountains onto which Grimrock led them were not like the gentle rolling hills of the east. These were ancient, terrible, and mighty, great fangs of stone clawing at the sky, their shoulders mantled in eternal snow. The way became a narrow ledge carved by runoff and elk, barely wide enough for a wagon. Men had to walk alongside, their shoulders pressed against the rough wood, their eyes averted from the yawning abyss that gaped just a wheel's turn away. The air grew thin and sharp, oxen lowed in distress, their breaths pluming in the frigid air, even as the sun beat down. Children grew quiet and listless. The company moved in a fearful silence, broken only by the groan of wood, the clink of a harness, and the endless mournful wind that sang through the stunted pines. It was here that tragedy, swift and cruel, found them. Young Liam Cooper, a boy of 7 years with eyes the color of summer sky, slipped while chasing a ground squirrel near the camp's edge. His small cry was swallowed by the wind, and he vanished over the precipice before his mother's outstretched hands could grasp him. They found his broken body on a ledge 100 feet below. There was no wood for a proper pyre, no earth deep enough for a grave. They wrapped him in a blanket and placed him in a deep crevice, piling what stones they could find upon him to guard him away from the beasts of the mountains. His mother's wail that night was a sound that etched itself into the soul of every listener, a raw, terrible song of loss against the immense, uncaring indifference of the mountains. The dreams of the White Valley seemed then a childish fancy, a cruel joke played by a malicious land. The next day, as if the mountains themselves sought to expel them, the storm came. It was not a storm of rain, but of early snow, a blizzard, savage and sudden, howling down from the peaks like a host of white wraiths. Visibility vanished. The world shrank to a shrieking white hell. Wagons had to be abandoned where they stood, their teams cut loose, families huddled together under tarpaulins, the warmth of their bodies the only defense against the killing cold. When the storm passed, leaving a world blindingly white and silent under the hard blue sky, they took stock. 9 wagons were lost, either buried or pitched over the edge. 22 souls had perished, frozen in the night. Among the dead was Sarah Cooper, Henry's wife, who had given her blankets to a feverish child. They found her seated against a wagon wheel, a smile of peace frozen upon her lips, as if in death she had seen a far-away green country at last. Henry Cooper stood over her, a man utterly undone. The light in his eyes, the fate that had led them all, was extinguished. He was now a hollow man carved from ice and grief. It was Grimrock who took over command then. With a practicality born of survival, he ordered the remaining wagons stripped of all but the bare essential supplies. The dead were left in their snowy sepulchre. There was no strength to bury them. The company, now less than 50 souls, broken and grieving, became a funeral procession, driven onward by only the base instinct to flee this place of their despair. Rock took them downward, out of the realm of snow and death, into a high hidden valley. It was not the white valley of promise. It was a narrower, darker place, a deep cleft between mighty peaks, with a swift, cold river running through it, and a forest of dark pines climbing its sides. But it was sheltered, and it was there, upon the banks of that unnamed river, as the last of their strength failed them, that they made this decision. They could go no further. Winter was closing its fist. The pass ahead was sealed with snow. The way back was impassable. They were trapped. "This is it," Grimrock announced, his voice gravelly and final. "This is where we winter, if we can. There is game, there is water, there is wood. The rest is up to us." And so the lost colony of the Cooper Company was founded not in triumph, but in exhaustion and despair. They had sought the promised land, and had found instead a fortress of solitude, beautiful and terrible. Their struggle to survive had truly begun. Their first order of business was shelter. Using axes grown dull on the hard journey, they set upon the tall straight pines. Cabins began to rise, not neat log cabin homes of settled townships, but rude, draughty huts, clinked together with mud and moss. The largest structure, built in the center of the clearing near the river, was a common hall, with a great firestone placed at one end. It would be used for their meetings, their infirmary, their sanctuary, and they named it simply the Hearth. Leadership felt not to the scattered Henry Cooper, who sat for days staring into the fire, nor solely to the taciturn Grimrock, who was a guide, not a governor. Instead, a council emerged. There was Anna Petrova, a widow from Poland whose hands were skilled with needle and herbs, who became their healer. There was Thomas Rivers, a quiet, relentless man who had been a carpenter, who had directed the erection of their crude buildings. And there was Eleanor Vance, a schoolteacher from Boston, whose voice was calm and whose mind was sharp, who became their scribe and the keeper of their morale. It was she who started reading nightly by firelight in the hearth from their few precious books, a small bastion of civilization against the pressing darkness. The struggle for food was ceaseless. The men, led by Rock, hunted in the valley. They found elk, mule deer, and mountain sheep, but the hunting was hard, and the shots had to be true, for powder and ammunition were more precious than gold. The women and children foraged for late berries, roots, and herbs. They set lines into the river for trout. Every scrap was used. Nothing was wasted. The taste of venison day after day, week after week, became a monotonous penance. The first true test of their spirit came with the sickness, a coughing fever that swept through the cramped cabins, burned through the young and old. Anna Petrova worked tirelessly, brewing teas of spruce needle and willow bark, applying poultices, but her supplies dwindled. 5 more graves were dug in the hard, frozen earth by the river, a small, grim orchard of death. Among them was Anya's own young daughter, Kasnia. It was after burying Kasnia that a change came over Anya. Her grief did not cripple her, it hardened her into flint. She sought out Grimrock. "The land provides," she said, her accent thick with sorrow and resolve. "But we must listen. Show me what the earth offers for healing." Rock, who had always held his knowledge close, saw the fire in her eyes and nodded. He began to teach her yarrow for staunching blood, herbs that could help with infection, the bitter roots that could break any fever. The healer became an apprentice of the land itself, and her authority grew. Meanwhile, a different shadow was growing. A man named Cable Hodge, a sullen teamster who had been one of Crocker's loudest supporters, began to murmur. He had lost his wife to the fever, and his grief festered into a venomous anger. He gathered a few of the more disaffected men around him. "Cooper led us to this," he would mutter in the dark corners of the cabins. "We followed his dream into this frozen hell. We buried her children here, while he stares at a wall. And for what? To be king of this wretched patch of snow? We should have gone with Crocker. We should never have left that trail." His words found fertile ground in tired, fearful hearts. A tension began to grip the colony, a coldness that was sharper than the winter wind. It was a division between those who looked outwards for someone to blame and those who looked inwards for the strength to endure. The breaking point came in the deep of winter, during a great hunger. A prolonged blizzard kept the hunters inside for a week. The food stores, which were never ample, dwindled to nothing. The last handful of flour was mixed with melted snow to make a thin gruel for the children. Despair, cold, and gnawing as the hunger in their bellies took hold. Hodge stood up in the hearth one afternoon, his face gaunt with firelight. "This is folly," he cried, his voice cracking. "We are waiting for death. I say we take off with what is left of the strength in our legs and try for the pass. To stay here is to die like animals in a trap." A fearful murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The ideal of action, any action, was preferable to the slow, passive death offered by starvation. Then a figure arose from a shadowed corner. It was Henry Cooper. He was thin, his clothes hung loose on his frame, but his eyes, for the first time since the passing of his wife, held a light. It was not the bright light, not the hopeful light of before, but a deeper, harder flame, tempered by the fire of loss. "You speak of death, Caleb Hodge," Cooper said, his voice low but carrying to every ear, "and you are right. Death is here. He has been our companion since the mountains. He took my wife, and he took your wife. He has taken our children. He sits with us at this fire." The hall was utterly silent. "But you are wrong in your remedy," Cooper continued. "You think to run from him. You cannot outrun death in these mountains. He is the Lord of the snow and the wind. He will find you on the pass, and he will take you alone and frozen, a nameless thing for the ravens." He paused, looking at each haggard face. "There is only one way to defy him. That is not to flee. It is to build. It is to plant a seed in this frozen earth and to dare it to grow. It is to build a wall against the wind. It is to have a child and sing it a song in this wilderness. That is the only victory we can have over death. To live. Not just to breed, but to live." He walked to the center of the room, to the great fire. "Hodge is right that we cannot go on as we are. So, from tomorrow, we change. We stop hoarding our strength. We pour it all out. We will dig through the snow to the river for fish. We will set snares for rabbits. We will melt snow for water until our hands are raw. We will not wait for salvation. We will make it. Here, now." He looked at Hodge, not in anger, but with a terrible pity. "The choice is yours, Caleb. You can either lead a party into the arms of death, or you can pick up an axe tomorrow and help me defy him." The speech changed everything. Hodge, shamed and outmaneuvered, slunk away. The next morning, a new energy, born of a desperate defiance, gripped the colony. They worked as they had never worked before, and it was Eleanor Vance, digging alongside Thomas Rivers, who struck her axe into the frozen ground near the river bank and found something. Not earth, but something entirely new. "Henry, Thomas, come quickly." They gathered around, and she uncovered a narrow stream of black, oily rock. Grimrock pushed through, knelt, and examined it. He broke off a piece and smelt it. A slow, rare smile cracked his weathered face. "Coal," he grunted. It was a humble thing, but it was fuel. It was warmth that did not require an exhausting journey for wood. In this desolate, cold place, it was life. That night, the hearth was warmer than it had ever been before. heated by the black stone from their own valley. The mood had shifted. They had been tested by cold, by hunger, by despair, and by division within themselves, and they had, by the narrowest of margins, held fast. But the mountain was yet to offer many more tests, and had many more inhabitants. When the thaw finally came, months later, it came reluctantly and slowly. The snow receded, revealing the land beneath, a beautiful, harsh country of rushing water, granite cliffs, and dense forests. With the spring came new life, but also new perils. The first sign was missing life. The few milk goats and chickens that they had managed to preserve through the winter began to vanish from their makeshift pens. At first, they blamed wolves or mountain lions, but Grimrock examined the tracks and the manner of the kill and grew even more grim. Not wolf, he said to the council, gathered in the hearth. Wolf takes, eats, leaves a mess. This is clean, taken whole, and the tracks are not right. What then? Asked Thomas Rivers. Men, Rock said quietly. A silence fell over the room. They were not alone. Days later, a hunting party, led by Rock, returned empty handed and tense. They had been tracking elk and managed a great kill, but it was taken from them. Arrows, fletched with hawk's feathers, had been shot into the trees around them, not at them, but close enough for them to understand the warning. Then they saw it. Shadows lifting through the trees at the edge of the clearing, tall, silent figures on horseback, watching them from the ridgeline, the people of the valley, the firstborn of the land. They were making their presence known. Fear, cold and familiar, gripped the colony. They had heard stories around campfires on the plains, tales of savage raids, of torture, of wagon trains completely wiped out. Panic set in. Men stood guard all night, their rifles loaded, staring into the whispering darkness, jumping at every snapped twig. Caleb Hodge found his voice again. I told you, we were not just starving, we were prey. We must fortify, attack them before they attack us. But Grimrock and Henry Cooper counseled caution. They've had every chance to attack us in our weakness during the past winter, Cooper reasoned. They did not. They watched. They warned. They are not mindless savage. They are testing us. It was Annie Petrova who proposed a different path. We're in their home. We're invaders. Perhaps. Perhaps we should not pick up the rifle first, she said. Perhaps we should pick up a gift. The idea was met with disbelief, even derision. But Cooper, remembering the lessons of the winter, that the direct confrontation was not always the wisest path, agreed. What gift? He asked. Anya brought forth a bolt of red cloth, one of her last few possessions from the old world. A color they may favor, she said. She added a small forged iron knife, a thing of wonder to those who lived with flint and bone. The next morning, a party of three, Cooper, Rock, and Anya, walked to the edge of the clearing where the watchers had been seen. They laid the gifts on flat rock and retreated, their hands open and empty. For 2 days, nothing happened. The gifts remained, the tensions grew unbearable, and then, on the third morning, the gifts were gone. In their place was a bundle of expertly tanned elk hides and a haunch of fresh venison. It was not a peace, but it was a conversation. It was a beginning. Over the following weeks, a fragile, silent dialogue continued. The colonists would leave offerings, iron nails, woven blankets, a clay pot. The firstborn would leave gifts in return, more hide, a basket of edible roots, arrows of a quality the settlers could only marvel at. The breakthrough came when a party of settlers fishing downstream came across a young native boy. His leg was trapped under a fallen log in the rapids, desperately trying to keep his head above the churning water. Without hesitation, Thomas Rivers and two others plunged into the icy torrent and, at great risk to themselves, freed him and carried him back to the colony. His people followed, emerging from trees, their faces etched with fear and anger. They were led by a tall, imposing man, his face stern and intelligent, his bearing that of a chief. He watched as Anya Petrova, using the knowledge Rock had taught her, and her own innate skills, set the boy's broken leg and bound it with splints. The chief, who they would come to know as Stone, watched every movement. When Anya was done, she offered the boy a drink of her willow bark tea. Stone stepped forward, took the cup from her hand, and drank it first, testing it. Satisfied, he allowed his son to drink. He then spoke to Grim Rock, in a mixture of sign language and scattered English words. Rock translated, "He says the debt is paid. The life of his son is worth more than the meat and the hides. He says we may stay, for now, but we must not take more than the valley gives. We must not dig deep into the skin of the earth. We must not poison the water." An understanding was reached. They were not friends, but they were not enemies. They were neighbors in a harsh land, bound by a shared struggle for survival. And so the roots of our colony was laid. We thank you for following the story along thus far. If you're interested in the continued journey of our characters, do consider subscribing and liking this video, as your support means the world to us. Do let us know in the comments below where you're listening to this story from and if any part of it would have resonated deeply with you. We are also open to any proposals for topics and areas that might be considered within our stories. Our characters have yet to declare so many adventures, and we look forward to sharing all of them with you.